Welcome to Soft Sleep Tales, a place where timeless stories, gentle narration, and quiet atmospheres guide you toward rest. Before tonight's story begins, you are warmly invited to share where you are listening from in the comments below. It is always a comfort to see this quiet community reaching across the world night by night. And if these stories bring you a sense of calm, you are welcome to subscribe and join us on these peaceful journeys. Now, take a moment to get comfortable. Settle into your bed or your favorite chair. Gently close your eyes, take a slow, deep breath, and allow the day to soften and fade. Let my voice carry you quietly into sleep, to a place where imagination drifts and rest comes naturally. It is the autumn of 1881, and in the city of Bath, where the limestone buildings rise pale and orderly from the valley of the Avon, and the streets carry the particular self-possession of a city that has always known its own worth, there stands a printing house on the lower end of Trim Street that has been producing books and pamphlets and notices for the people of the city since before the current proprietor's father was born. It is not a large establishment, 3 presses on the ground floor, 2 of them working regularly, and one kept in reserve for the heavy months around the spring and autumn markets, a compositing room at the back, where the type is set and the pages assembled, a small office at the front, where orders are taken and invoices written, and beneath all of this, reached by a narrow stair behind the compositing room, a cellar that has been used for storage since the printing house first opened, and that contains, as a consequence, the accumulated evidence of every decade of its operation. Old type cases, worn rollers, bundles of proofs tied with string and never discarded, the mechanical detritus of 50 years of printing, stacked against walls of old limestone, and largely forgotten by everyone, except the one person whose job it is to know what is there. That person is Miss Ida Graves, who at 27 years of age has been employed by the Trim Street printing house for 3 years, first as a compositor's assistant, and then, after demonstrating an aptitude for the work that Mr. Aldous, the proprietor, had not initially expected from a young woman, as the keeper of the printing stones. She is neither tall nor short, neither plain nor particularly striking, but possesses instead that quality of exact attention that makes her nearly indispensable to an establishment that depends, in all its work, on precision. Her dark hair is kept pinned severely away from her face, because she has learned, in 3 years, that loose hair and printing machinery do not prosper together. Her apron is always ink-stained by the end of a working day, sometimes by the middle of it. Her hands are small but strong, and carry, in the creases of the knuckles, a permanent faint blue-black that no amount of soap entirely removes. She came to the printing house because she needed employment, and because Mr. Aldous had advertised for someone who could read, who could count, and who would not mind irregular hours and occasional heavy lifting. She had met all 3 requirements, and she had asked, at the interview, whether she might be permitted to learn the press itself, and not merely the clerical side of the work. Mr. Aldous had looked at her over his spectacles for a longer time than was comfortable. Then he had said that he supposed there was no particular reason why not. There had been, as it turned out, every reason why not, according to the 2 compositors who had been with the printing house for 20 years each, and who had opinions about the presence of young women at printing presses that they had expressed with the freedom of men who had never previously needed to moderate them. Ida had outlasted their opinions by the simple method of being better at the work than they expected and more persistent than they had hoped. By the end of her first year, they had stopped commenting. By the end of her second, they had started coming to her when a stone was giving them trouble. The printing stones are her particular domain, not the type, which belongs to the compositors, not the presses, which belong to the pressers. The stones, the large flat limestone slabs, each one perhaps 2 feet by 3, ground perfectly smooth on one face, on which the type is assembled and locked before the impression is made. The stones are the foundation of everything. Damage a stone and the impression is spoiled. Neglect a stone and it warps. Care for a stone properly, and it will outlast every other component of the press by several decades. Ida cares for them properly. She checks their surfaces each morning for any new damage. Chips, scratches, the fine networks of hairline cracks that develop in limestone under repeated stress. She cleans them after each use with the particular solution of potash and water that she has refined through experiment to exactly the right strength for this particular grade of Bath limestone. She knows each stone individually. The small chip on the left edge of number 3, the slight hollow at the center of number 7. That means it must be shimmed before use. The way number 5 rings differently from the others when you tap it, a slightly higher note that has always told her it is in perfect condition. The cellar is where the retired stones are kept. The stones that have been used so many times that their surfaces are no longer flat enough for precise work, or that have sustained damage too significant to repair. There are 14 of them down there, stacked against the north wall in pairs, with wooden boards between them to prevent further damage. Ida checks on them every few weeks, not because Mr. Aldous has asked her to, because they are stones in her care, and stones in her care are attended to. It is a Tuesday in October. The printing house is quiet at the end of the afternoon, the pressers having gone home an hour ago, and Mr. Aldous having left at 4 for a meeting with a client in the pump room. Ida has stayed to finish the registration of a new order and to check the condition of number 4, which has been making a sound she doesn't like during the morning runs. When the order is recorded and number 4 has been examined and found to have a small crack developing near the lower right corner that will need monitoring, she takes her lamp and goes down the cellar stairs. The cellar smells of limestone and old ink, and the particular musty cool of a space below street level that has never been properly dry. The lamp she carries throws the familiar shadows across the familiar stacks. She does her rounds, the 14 retired stones, each one checked in its stack, each board gap verified to be adequate. It is at the back of the cellar, behind a stack of the old proof bundles and a broken type case that has been down here since before she started, that she sees something she has not noticed before. Another stone, or the edge of one, the distinctive grey limestone face, just visible between the proof bundles and the wall, leaning at an angle that suggests it was put there quickly and without much thought for retrieval. Ida sets her lamp on the floor and begins to move the proof bundles aside. They are heavy with damp, and several of them have partially stuck together at their edges. She works carefully, moving each bundle to a clear space until the stone is accessible. It is larger than the working stones, perhaps 3 feet by 4, and it has been painted. A layer of black paint, thick and old, applied over the printing face of the stone in a way that is unmistakably deliberate. Someone has painted over this stone on purpose, not repainted it for reuse, which would involve grinding back the surface first. Simply covered it, hidden what is on it. Ida crouches beside it with the lamp. The paint is old and has cracked in places, the natural cracking of old paint over stone as the temperature changes over decades. Through the cracks, in 2 or 3 places, she can see the faint reversed impression of the surface beneath. Text, letter forms, the ghost of whatever was on this stone before someone decided to cover it. She sits back on her heels and looks at the painted stone for a long time. She has been working with stones for 3 years. She knows them as a category, and she knows the 14 in this cellar individually. She does not know this one. She has not seen it in any record. She has not heard either of the compositors mention it. Mr. Aldous has never referred to it. And yet here it is, larger than any stone currently in use, pushed to the back of the cellar behind years of accumulated material, its face painted black with the thoroughness of someone who wanted to make absolutely certain that no one could read what was on it. Not discarded, hidden, there is a difference. She stays in the cellar for another half-hour, examining the stone from all angles with the lamp held close. The cracks in the paint are random, as cracking always is, but there are enough of them, and the impressions visible through them are clear enough that she can make out, with patience, fragments of what lies beneath. A title, she thinks, from the arrangement of the text near the top of the stone, larger letters than the body text, and below that, in smaller characters, what might be an author's name. She cannot read it through the paint. Not yet. She goes back upstairs. She locks the printing house. She walks home to her rooms in Monmouth Street. In the October evening, the city pale and orderly around her, the gas lamps just coming on along the Avon parades. She thinks about the painted stone, about the deliberateness of covering it, about what it would take and what it would mean to paint over a printing stone. It is not a small act. The stone is large and heavy. Carrying it to the cellar would have required effort. Painting it would have required decision. Someone, at some point, wanted what was on that stone to be unreadable, wanted it badly enough to take considerable trouble to ensure it. But they kept the stone. They did not destroy it. They hid it and covered it and pushed it to the back of a cellar behind years of accumulated material. But they kept it. Ida has always believed that people who keep things are different from people who discard them. That keeping requires a decision as much as discarding does, that you do not keep something by accident. You keep it because some part of you cannot quite bring yourself to make it finally gone. She eats her supper. She reads for an hour by the window. She goes to bed in the early October dark and lies awake for longer than usual, the painted stone present in her mind, with the particular persistence of things that want to be understood. She is 27 years old. She has been working with stones for 3 years. She knows from those 3 years that paint over limestone is not a permanent concealment. Given the right solvent, applied with the right care, old paint can be removed from a limestone surface without damaging what lies beneath. She knows this because she has done it once before on a stone that came to the printing house in a job lot and was found to have been previously used and improperly cleaned. The process had taken 2 hours and considerable patience and had revealed, beneath the old ink residue, a stone surface in perfect condition. Paint is thicker than ink residue. It will take longer, but it can be done. She is certain it can be done. She will not ask Mr. Aldous first. This thought arrives without her quite deciding to think it, and once arrived it does not leave. She will find out what is on the stone before she tells anyone else about it. Not from deception. She is not by nature a deceptive person. From instinct, the same instinct that makes her check a stone herself before reporting a problem to the presser. The instinct that says, understand what you have found before you hand it to someone else. She sleeps eventually. Outside her window, the city of Bath settles into its quiet autumn evening. The Avon runs in its stone channel. The gas lamps burn in their ordered rows. And in the cellar of the printing house on Trim Street, in the dark behind the proof bundles, the painted stone waits with the patience of something that has already been waiting for a very long time. In 3 years, she has come to know the printing house, the way she knows the stones, its sounds and rhythms, the particular noise the larger press makes when its ink roller needs re-inking, the way the compositing room falls quiet in the hour before the presses finish, when everyone is concentrating, the smell of the place at different times of day, fresh ink in the morning, the iron and paper smell of a press that has been running for hours, the cooler mineral smell of the evening when the presses are stilled, and the building returns to itself. She has found, in these 3 years, that she does not miss the life she might have had. There had been an expectation from her family that she would eventually make a different kind of arrangement for herself. The kind of arrangement that does not involve printing stones and ink on your hands. She has found that she has no interest in such arrangements. The work suits her, the exactitude of it, the way a stone can be read, assessed, understood, the way a problem with a stone is always, ultimately, solvable if you bring enough patience and enough knowledge to it. She has been, she thinks sometimes, suited to this work in a way she might not have been suited to very much else, and she is grateful to the work for requiring her fully and not requiring her to be anything other than what she is. She begins on Wednesday morning, before Mr. Aldous arrives at 8, before either of the compositors comes in. She is at the printing house by 6:30, with her lamp and the supplies she has gathered from the cleaning cabinet, the potash solution, a bottle of turpentine, soft rags, a wide, flat brush that she uses for stone preparation. She moves the stone from behind the proof bundles to a clear space in the center of the cellar. This takes some effort. The stone is large and heavier than the working stones, and she has to tilt it carefully and walk it on its corners across the uneven cellar floor. When it is positioned, She crouches beside it and studies the painted surface again in the lamplight. The paint is old. She can tell from the quality of the cracking and from the way it has sunk slightly into the stone surface in places, as though the limestone has absorbed some of it over decades. Old paint is more brittle than fresh paint. More brittle is easier to work with. She will start at the edges, where the cracking is already established, and work inward. She applies the turpentine to a rag and begins. The work is slow and requires considerable patience. Turpentine softens the old paint, but does not dissolve it, and she must work the rag in small, careful circles, lifting the softened paint without pressing it deeper into the cracks in the stone surface. The wrong pressure in the wrong place could damage the stone face beneath, and whatever is on this stone, she wants to be able to read it. She works for 40 minutes before she hears the printing house door above her open. Mr. Aldous, earlier than usual. She covers the stone with a cloth, picks up her lamp, and climbs the cellar stairs as unhurriedly as she can manage. Mr. Aldous, a narrow man of 60 with the perpetual slight frown of someone whose work requires exactitude and who has consequently stopped expecting anything else from the world, looks at her over his spectacles. "You are in early," he observes. "Number 4 has been concerning me," Ida says. "The crack near the lower right. I wanted to get a better look in good light before the morning run." This is true. It is also not the whole truth. She has found, in 3 years, that the most useful kind of truth to tell is the kind that answers the question asked and does not invite further questions. Mr. Aldous nods and goes to his office. Ida goes to number 4 and examines the crack for 10 minutes and writes a note about it in the stone book. Then the compositors arrive, and the day begins in earnest, and there is no time for the cellar until the evening. She returns to the stone each morning that week, in the hour before the printing house opens, and on the evenings when she is last to leave. She is patient. She has learned patience from the work itself, from the way stones require time, from the way ink requires time to dry, from the way every part of printing that is done well is done slowly. By Thursday afternoon, she has cleared perhaps a third of the surface. By Friday evening, working in the lamplight after everyone else has gone, she has cleared 2/3. And what she can see is this. The title, at the top of the stone, set in a typeface she recognizes as something old, fashionable perhaps 30 or 40 years ago and rarely used now. Large, deliberate letters, the title of a book, and beneath it, the author's name, 2 words, a woman's name. She clears the last of the paint on Saturday morning, working with particular care over the text areas, using a finer rag and less pressure, taking the paint back in thin layers until the limestone face is clean and the impression is clear. The full title reads, "The Condition of the Working Poor in the City of Bath, being a survey of their circumstances and a proposal for their relief," by Eleanor Voss. Ida sits back on her heels. She has been working in the lamplight of this cellar for the better part of a week, and her back aches and her knuckles are raw from the solvents, and she has been later to work each morning than she should have been. But here it is, the book that was on this stone, the title that someone painted over, The name of the woman who wrote it, Eleanor Voss. Ida does not know the name. She is 27 years old, and the book was apparently produced, based on the age of the paint and the style of the typeface, perhaps 30 years ago, when she was not yet born. Whatever happened to this book happened before she existed. She goes upstairs to the printing house archive, a set of order ledgers going back to the founding of the printing house, stored in a locked cabinet in the office. Mr. Aldous keeps the key in his desk drawer, which is not locked. Ida has never had reason to look in the ledgers before. She has reason now. She finds the ledger for 1,851, works through the entries chronologically, which requires patience because Mr. Aldous's predecessor kept records with a thoroughness that borders on the obsessive. Every order, every quantity, every price, every date of delivery. In April of 1851, she finds it. The condition of the working poor. 500 copies ordered by Voss, Walcott Street. Printed and delivered the 14th of April. And then, below this, in different ink, as though added later, order recalled, copies returned and destroyed per instruction. Stone retained pending further instruction. Further instruction never received. Ida reads this entry 3 times. 500 copies printed, then recalled, then destroyed. In April of 1851. She was not born until 1854. Whatever happened to Eleanor Voss and her book about the poor of Bath happened 3 years before she existed. And yet here is the stone, still in the cellar. The instruction to destroy it never given. The instruction to do anything else with it never given either. Simply retained and covered and pushed to the back and left. She closes the ledger and replaces it. Sits at Mr. Aldous's desk for a moment. The printing house is empty around her. It is a Saturday afternoon, and the city outside is going about its weekly business, with the unhurried elegance that Bath brings to everything. Recalled and destroyed. On whose instruction? The ledger does not say. 500 copies of a book about the conditions of the poor, printed and then immediately pulled from existence. Why? What was in it that someone wanted suppressed? Who wanted it suppressed? And who was Eleanor Voss of Walcott Street? And what happened to her when her book was taken back and destroyed? These are not questions Ida can answer from the printing house archive. She will need to look elsewhere. She has a name. She has an address, 30 years old, but an address. And she has the stone itself, now clean, the impression legible, the book that was on it present again, after 30 years of being covered. She takes the cloth off the stone on her way out of the cellar, looks at it one more time in the lamplight. The title clear, the name clear, Eleanor Voss. Ida does not know who you were, she thinks, looking at the name on the stone, but she intends to find out. In the days that follow, she continues to think about Eleanor Voss. She thinks about her in the mornings when she is checking the working stones, running her hand across their surfaces, the way she always does. She thinks about what it would mean to be a woman who built a printing house alone in this city in the 1840s, the things that would have made it difficult, the ways she would have been told, directly and indirectly, that it was not something she should be doing. Ida has some experience of this. She has been told this herself in various ways since she started at the printing house. She knows what it costs to do the work anyway. She thinks about the book, about spending 3 years writing something, researching it, visiting the places, recording the conditions, working out what could be changed and how, and then printing it herself and having it taken away in less than a week. 500 copies, every single one, not one surviving. She thinks about what that would do to a person, not to the work, which was gone and could not be recovered, to the person, to the certainty that the work was worth doing, to the belief that it was possible to say true things in print and have them read and have them matter. She does not know how she would survive it. She thinks she would not survive it easily. On Friday afternoon, when the stone is fully clean and the impression is legible from top to bottom, Ida sits with it in the cellar for a while. Just sits, the lamp on the floor beside her, the stone before her, the title and the name. She has spent a week on this, on finding it and cleaning it and uncovering what was there. She is not sure, sitting here now, what she has done or what she should do with what she has found. But she knows one thing clearly. The stone is here. The name is here. Eleanor Voss is here, in the reversed letter forms of a printing stone, as present as she is ever going to be. And Ida, who has been tending stones for 3 years, who has learned to read them and care for them and understand what they are saying, is the one who found her. There is a rightness in this that she cannot entirely explain, but that she feels, sitting here in the lamplit cellar, quite clearly. She goes back upstairs. She locks the printing house. She walks home in the October dark, the city lit and orderly around her, and she thinks about what to do next. She has a name. She has an address, 30 years old. She has a ledger entry that says recalled and destroyed. She has a stone that says otherwise. A stone that says, I was here. A stone that says, she wrote this. A stone that has been patient, in the dark, for 30 years, waiting for someone who would know what to do with it. Ida turns in at her door on Monmouth Street. She makes her supper. She sits at her table in the October evening, and she does not read, which is unusual for her. She simply sits and thinks about Eleanor Voss and the stone and what comes next. The answer, when it comes, is not complicated. The answer is, you find out who she was. You find out what happened. And then you do what a printer does. You put it on paper. You press it to the page. You make it exist in the world again. She goes to bed with this decision settled quietly inside her, the way decisions settle when they are the right ones. Not dramatically, simply there, ready. And in the cellar of the Trim Street printing house, in the dark, the stone waits. Clean now, legible, Eleanor Voss, present again after 30 years, in the reversed letters of limestone, waiting to be pressed to paper and made finally, properly, undeniably real. The Bath City Directory for 1851 is held in the reference room of the Guildhall Library, a building that Ida has passed 100 times without entering. She enters it on the Monday morning of the following week, before going to the printing house with a paper in her apron pocket on which she has written the address from the ledger. Walcott Street, E. Voss. The directory is a large, cumbersome volume that the librarian brings to her with the expression of someone accustomed to people who do not know how to handle reference materials. Ida handles it correctly, turning the pages with care, and finds the Walcott Street listings without difficulty. Voss, E. listed as a printer and stationer at number 41 Walcott Street. Not a writer, a printer. This stops her for a moment. She had imagined Eleanor Voss as a writer, as someone who had researched and written a book and brought it to the Trim Street printing house to be produced. But a printer would not bring a book to another printer. A printer would produce it themselves, unless they couldn't, unless something had prevented them. She looks at the directory again. Voss, E. is the only Voss listed in the 1851 directory. In the 1852 directory, which the librarian brings at her request, the entry is gone. Whatever happened in 1851 was enough to remove Eleanor Voss from the Bath City directory entirely. Ida walks to the printing house in the October morning and thinks about this as she walks. The city of Bath is beautiful in October. The pale limestone buildings catch the low autumn sun and glow with a warmth they do not have in summer. The leaves in the parks along the Avon have gone to amber and gold. People move through the streets with the particular unhurried quality of a city that considers itself civilized and has the architecture to prove it. Ida thinks about a woman who had a printing business on Walcott Street in 1851 and wrote a book about the poor of this same beautiful city and had it taken from her and destroyed, and then disappeared from the directory the following year. She tends to the printing house's work that morning with her usual efficiency, checks the stones, notes the progress of the crack in number 4, assists one of the compositors with a page that is not locking correctly, does everything that is required of her. But at lunchtime, instead of eating at her desk as she usually does, she walks to Walcott Street. Number 41 is a narrow Georgian house, converted at the ground floor into a shop selling hat trimmings. The woman behind the counter, when Ida asks whether she knows anything about the premise's history, shakes her head with the indifference of someone who has been asked this kind of question before and has never found it interesting. Before the hat trimmings, she says, it was a Chandler's. Before that, she doesn't know. Ida thanks her and goes back to work. She is thinking about the stone, about the instruction in the ledger. Stone retained pending further instruction. Further instruction never received. Who would have given the further instruction? Eleanor Voss, presumably. She had commissioned the printing. She would have been the one to instruct its disposal. But she gave no instruction, and then she disappeared from the directory. On the Wednesday of that week, Ida is sorting a delivery of new paper stock in the compositing room when the printing house door opens and a man comes in. He is old, perhaps 68 or 70, tall, somewhat stooped, with the careful movements of someone whose joints have begun to require consultation before action. He wears a dark coat that was well made a long time ago and has been looked after carefully since. His hat is held in both hands. His face carries the particular quality of someone who has come to ask for something and has been uncertain for some time whether to ask. He asks for Mr. Aldous. Mr. Aldous is in his office and comes out with the wariness he applies to unexpected visitors. The old man introduces himself. His name is Henry Voss. He is inquiring, he says, carefully, about a printing order placed in 1851. A book. He believes the printing house may still have the stone. Ida, in the compositing room, goes very still. Mr. Aldous says, with the polite firmness of a man defending his establishment, that he has been proprietor for 18 years and knows nothing of any order from 1851. Mr. Voss says, with equal politeness, that he understands this perfectly and is not suggesting any wrongdoing on Mr. Aldous's part. He is simply asking whether a record exists and whether a stone might still be present in the premises. Mr. Aldous says he will have his girl look into the records. He uses the phrase his girl. Ida, in the compositing room, notes this with the flat attention of someone who has long since stopped expecting anything different. She comes out. She looks at Henry Voss. He looks at her. He is perhaps 40 years older than she is. His eyes are grey and tired and carry in them the quality of someone who has been patient for a very long time and is not sure how much patience remains. She says to Mr. Aldous, "There is a record in the 1851 ledger, an order for a book called The Condition of the Working Poor. The order was recalled and the copies were destroyed. The stone was retained." Mr. Aldous looks at her with the expression of someone who has just realized his employee knows more about this matter than she should. She says, "The stone is in the cellar. I found it last week. I cleaned the paint from it." The silence that follows is the kind of silence that happens when several things become clear at once. Mr. Aldous is processing the revelation that there is a stone in his cellar he did not know about. Henry Voss is processing the information that the stone exists and that someone has already found it. Ida is watching both of them with the steady attention she gives to things she needs to understand. Henry Voss is the first to speak. His voice is quiet and very controlled. "You cleaned the paint from it," he says. "You can read the stone." "Yes," Ida says. He looks at her for a long moment. Then he looks at his hat, which he is still holding in both hands. Then he looks back at her. "Eleanor Voss was my mother," he says. Ida does not speak. She simply waits, as she waits for everything, with the patience of someone who understands that the next thing said will matter. "She died in 1853, Henry Voss says, 2 years after the book was taken. Not from the taking of the book," he adds, as though anticipating an assumption, "from a fever. But she never—" He stops. He looks at the hat again. "She never recovered herself after it," he says. "After the book was recalled, after the printing house she had built was taken from her to pay the legal costs of the people who had the book suppressed." He looks up. "I was 18 when she died," he says. "I am 68 now. I have been trying for 50 years to find a copy of that book, a single copy, any evidence that it existed, any evidence of what she wrote." He stops again. This time the silence is not controlled. This time there is something in it that costs him. The stone is the first thing I have found, he says, in 50 years. She spends Monday and Tuesday doing what she can from the sources available to her. The 1,851 city directory has given her the address. The printing house ledger has given her the date and the fact of the suppression. She goes, on Tuesday afternoon, to the office of the Bath Chronicle and asks whether she might look through the archive for April 1851. The clerk, a young man of 20 or so, who regards her arrival with the mild confusion of someone encountering a situation not covered by his training, takes some persuading. She explains that she is employed at the Trim Street printing house and is researching a printing order from that year. This is true enough to say with confidence. He brings her the bound archive for April and May of 1851 and leaves her at a reading table with it. She works through it methodically. The newspaper for April 1851 is full of the usual commerce of a prosperous city. Society notices, property transactions, the movements of notable persons, the small dramas of civic life. She finds no mention of Eleanor Voss, no mention of the book, no public account of what was done. This does not surprise her. The suppression of a book published by a woman about the poor would not have been reported as news in 1851. It would have been reported as nothing at all, because the people who suppressed it were the same people whose activities were reported with approval in these pages. Silence, she thinks, is also a form of printing. The decision about what not to say is as deliberate as the decision about what to say. She walks back to the printing house through the October afternoon with the particular feeling of someone who has confirmed an absence rather than found a presence. Eleanor Voss was erased not only from the bookshops, but from the record, from the newspaper, from the directory, from everything except the stone, which they painted over, but could not quite bring themselves to destroy. On Wednesday morning, she is compositing a straightforward order, a solicitor's letterhead, 100 sheets, when the printing house door opens. She hears Mr. Aldous' voice from the office, and then another voice, older, quieter, a man's voice with the careful precision of someone who has thought about what he is going to say before he says it. She sets down the compositing stick. She listens. She hears the name Voss. She stands very still in the compositing room for a moment. Then she comes out. She comes out and she sees him. An old man, tall and careful. A dark coat that has been looked after. A hat held in both hands. And she understands immediately, before he says another word, that this is not coincidence. That a man coming to a printing house asking about a book from 1851 and the stone she found in the cellar last week are the same story, that they have always been the same story, that the stone was waiting for him as much as it was waiting for her. She thinks about this later, much later, when she is trying to understand what she feels about what happened. The stone was not waiting for either of them specifically. It was simply waiting for someone to find it and someone to need it, to exist in the same week. That this happened is not miraculous. It is simply the way things sometimes fall, the way patience and necessity occasionally arrive together at the same point, at the right moment. But standing in the compositing room doorway, looking at Henry Voss, she does not think any of this. She only knows that the name he has come about is the name on the stone, and that she is the one who can tell him it is there. She walks forward. She says, "There is a record in the 1851 ledger." She says it clearly and without hesitation. She says everything she knows. And in the silence that follows, she watches Henry Voss's face do the particular thing that faces do when something very long awaited is suddenly and unexpectedly present. Not joy, exactly. Not relief. Something quieter and more careful than either. Something that has been folded very small for 50 years and is very slowly, very cautiously beginning to open. Mr. Aldous, who has been standing in the doorway of his office throughout this exchange, with the expression of someone watching an event whose significance he does not quite grasp, says that he supposes they had better go down and look at the stone. He says this in the tone of a man who would prefer to be doing anything else, but recognizes that the situation has moved beyond his management. Ida leads them down the cellar stairs. Henry Voss descends carefully, one hand on the wall, his joints requiring their consultation. At the bottom of the stairs, he stops and waits for Ida to position the lamp. The stone is in the center of the cellar floor, where she left it after the final cleaning. The paint is gone entirely now. The limestone face is clean, the impression clear, the reverse text legible to anyone who knows how to read a printing stone. Henry Voss stands at the edge of the lamp's light and looks at the stone. He does not move for a long time. He does not speak. He simply stands there, this old man in his well-tended old coat, looking at the reversed impression of his mother's name on a limestone slab in the cellar of a Bath printing house on a Wednesday morning in October 1881. Ida stays back. She understands, instinctively, that this moment does not belong to her. She found the stone. She cleaned it. But the stone was his mother's. The 50 years of looking was his. This moment is his. Mr. Aldous, who does not have this instinct, begins to say something about the legal status of property retained for 30 years. Ida looks at him. He stops. Eventually, Henry Voss crouches beside the stone. His knees protest visibly. He lowers himself slowly, using one hand on the floor for support, until he is close to the stone's surface. He reaches out and touches the text with 2 fingers, the reversed letters of his mother's name. He stays in this position for some time. Then he straightens, with some effort, and turns to Ida. "Can it be printed from?" he asks. His voice is steady. Only someone listening very carefully would hear what it costs him to keep it so. Ida looks at the stone. She has been considering this question since Saturday. The surface, once cleaned, is in better condition than she expected. The impression is clear and the letter forms intact. 30 years of being painted over in a cellar has not damaged the limestone below. Limestone, she has always said, is more patient than people give it credit for. "Yes," she says, "I believe it can." He looks at her. The grey, tired eyes, the 50 years of patience in them. "This is only the cover," he says. The title page stone. The interior of the book would have been set in type. The type is long gone. We have only this. Ida nods. She knows this. A book requires many pages of type, each one set individually and locked on its stone, each one printed and then the type distributed back into the cases for the next job. The title page stone would have been kept because the title is not reassembled from type each time. It is set once and kept on a dedicated stone. The interior of the book is gone, but the title is here. His mother's name is here. They stand there for a while, the three of them, in the cellar of the Trim Street printing house. Mr. Aldous is thinking about legal liability. Ida is thinking about limestone and patience and the things that survive. Henry Voss is thinking about his mother, most likely, and about 50 years, and about what it means to find something you had stopped expecting to find. They go back upstairs. Mr. Aldous makes tea with the stiff hospitality of a man who does not normally make tea for people who come to his printing house, but senses that something is required of him. He leaves Ida and Henry Voss at the compositor's bench and goes back to his office, where he will no doubt be writing a letter to a solicitor. Henry Voss wraps both hands around his teacup. His hands are large and slightly unsteady now, the hands of an old man. Ida watches them and thinks of her own hands, 27 years old and ink-stained, and the 40 years between those two pairs of hands that have been spent in different kinds of looking for the same thing. Tell me about her, Ida says, if you would like to. Henry Voss looks at his tea for a moment. Then he begins. His mother had come to Bath from Bristol at 22, he says, with very little money and considerable determination, and the knowledge of printing that she had learned from her own father, who ran a small press in Bristol and had taught her everything because she was the one who wanted to learn. She had started on Walcott Street with a single press and built it slowly into a proper establishment over 15 years. Jobbing printing mostly. Handbills, notices, the small, practical printed matter that a city requires in quantity and does not think to credit. But also, occasionally, books. She had always wanted to write, Henry says. Not novels? She was not, he says with a slight smile that is also the ghost of something else. A woman with much patience for fiction. She wanted to write about what she saw, about the people who lived in the parts of Bath that visitors did not walk through, the courts and alleys off Avon Street, the crowded lodging houses near the river, the children who worked in the laundries and the tanneries, and the factories that made the beautiful city possible. From a polite distance, she spent 3 years on the book, he says, visiting, recording, proposing specific changes to specific institutions, naming names. He pauses on this, naming the names of the people who profited from the conditions she was describing. That was what they could not tolerate, not the descriptions of the poor, the names of the prosperous. It took less than a week, he says, from printing to recall, a solicitor's letter, then a second, then the threat of legal action. That would have cost her the printing house, and possibly more. She gave up the books. She had no choice. But they took the printing house anyway. In the end, through a debt called in at an inconvenient moment. These things can always be arranged. He says, if the will is there and the money is there and the person you want to silence has neither. Ida listens to all of this the way she listens to the printing house's work, with full attention, without interruption. She died in 1853, Henry says again. He does not elaborate on this. He has already said it once. Some things do not require saying twice. I have been trying to find the book, he says, because I wanted people to know it existed, that she wrote it, that she spent 3 years of her life on it, and that it was real, and it was good, and it was taken from her. Not for my sake, he says. He is 68 years old. He has fewer reasons to think about his own sake than he once did. For hers, because she deserves to be known, because what she wrote deserved to be read, because the people she wrote about deserved to have someone write about them and have the writing survive. Ida is quiet for a moment after he finishes. She is thinking about the stone, about the title page impression, clear and intact, preserved for 30 years beneath the paint, about what a title page can do. The book itself is gone, she says slowly. The text, the type was distributed long ago, but the stone is here, and a stone is a press, and a press can print. He looks at her. His expression is careful, as though he is trying not to assume what she means. The title page, she says, your mother's name. The title of the book. We cannot print the book itself, but we can print evidence that it existed. A single broadsheet. The title, the author, the date it was recorded. What happened to it? What happened to her? She pauses. This is not something Mr. Aldous would sanction. She knows this already. Mr. Aldous is a careful man, and the kind of printing she is describing is not careful printing. It is printing with intention, printing as an act rather than a service. But there are other printing houses in Bath, and the stone does not belong to Mr. Aldous. Legally, she suspects, it belongs to the estate of Eleanor Voss, which means it belongs, in the absence of any other heir, to the man sitting across from her. Henry Voss looks at her for a long moment. She is 27 years old. She has ink permanently in the creases of her knuckles. She found his mother's stone in a cellar and cleaned it with her own hands before she knew what it was. You would do this? He says. Not a question, an observation. Someone ought to, Ida says. The October afternoon light is coming through the printing house windows now, the low autumn sun turning the compositing room warm. The two presses stand idle in the silence. The stone books are lined up on their shelf. The smell of the printing house, ink and metal and paper, and the faint mineral smell of limestone is the smell Ida has breathed every working day for 3 years. She thinks about Eleanor Voss, who built a printing house on Walcott Street and spent 3 years writing a book about the poor of Bath, and had everything taken from her, about a stone hidden in a cellar for 30 years, about a man who has been looking for 50 years, about paint that covers things but does not destroy them, about limestone that is more patient than people give it credit for. The broadsheet they print, 2 weeks later, on a small press in a printing house on Kingsmead Square, whose proprietor is an old friend of Henry Voss's and who listens to the story over a long afternoon and then says that he will print it for the cost of the paper, nothing more. The broadsheet is simple, a reproduction of the title page impression from the stone. The title, the author's name. Below this, in plain type, a short account. 500 copies of this book were printed in Bath in April 1851 and recalled and destroyed before they could be read. The author was Eleanor Voss, printer of Walcott Street. The stone from which this impression is taken survived in the cellar of the Trim Street printing house for 30 years. It was found and cleaned in October 1881 by a person who did not yet know what it was, but who considered it her responsibility to understand what she had found. The broadsheet is sent to every library in Bath, to the newspaper offices, to the institutions mentioned in the title, to the descendants of the people who had the book suppressed, whose names Henry Voss has carried in his memory for 50 years. Whether it changes anything, neither of them knows. Whether anyone reads it carefully, neither of them knows. Whether Eleanor Voss's book is remembered, or whether the broadsheet itself is read for a week and then filed away in a library catalogue and largely forgotten, neither of them knows. What they know is that it was printed, that the name is on paper again, that the title exists in ink, that a stone kept in a cellar for 30 years has finally been pressed to paper and done the work it was made to do. On the evening after the broadsheet is sent out, Ida walks home along the Avon parades in the October dark. The river runs in its stone channel beside her, black and quiet. The gas lamps reflect in it in long amber lines. The city of Bath is beautiful in the dark, its pale buildings holding the lamplight in their limestone faces. Limestone, Ida thinks, patient limestone. The stone that built this city and the stone that remembers what this city did, and the stone that, cleaned and pressed to paper, can say so. She is 27 years old. She has been working with stones for 3 years. She has a long time yet to understand what they can do. She goes home. She eats her supper. She reads for an hour. She goes to bed in the October dark and sleeps well for the first time in 2 weeks, without the stone and its questions keeping her awake. The questions have been answered. The stone has been heard. The name is on paper. That is enough. For tonight, at least, that is enough. And now, dear listener, it is time for you to rest. You have walked with Ida through the streets of Bath and down into a cellar and back up again with something unexpected in her hands. You have sat with Henry Voss and the 50 years he carried before he knew what to do with them. You have watched two people, 40 years apart, do what could be done with what was there. Let your breathing slow now. Let the warmth of wherever you are settle around you. Let the day's difficulties grow smaller and quieter and further away. You do not need to have solved anything tonight. You only need to have been here, paying attention, which you have been. The stone is in the Kingsmead printing house now, properly catalogued, properly kept. Eleanor Voss's name is on paper in the libraries of Bath. The Avon runs in its channel. The city is pale and patient in the dark. Close your eyes. Some things survive because they are hidden. Some things survive because someone finds them and understands what they are looking at. Some things survive simply because limestone is more patient than the people who try to cover it. All is well. The name is on paper. The stone has been heard. Sleep now and trust that the things worth preserving have a way of persisting until the right person comes along to find them. Good night.